This fictional character, Sherlock Holmes, says the following: you see what you don't observe. Now, I want to expand it a little bit because most people don't even know what observing means. What they do is they compare things with their own expectations and they consider that observing. No. When you see someone who behaves differently and you consider them disrespectful, that is a value judgment based upon your expectation for how things have to go. And who conditions you into thinking that things have to be that way? Your parents, your environment, your culture. So you consider that other individual offensive is based on your expectation. So you tracking their behavior and then label it offensive, that's not observing. That is comparing. And that is validating yourself so you won't have to examine whether your own expectations are right or not. So too many people compare, they do not observe. Let me tell you what observing means. To observe means that you take a deep breath, you de-stress, and you look and hear to see what's going on without immediately assigning a meaning to it. Because that's something we often do. Also, believers do it. We assign meaning to things that happen. Let's say that you're in town and you are on your way to the supermarket and you see a colleague. The colleague sees you but rushes away quickly. Now, you've seen that happening. And in your mind, you are familiar with these individuals. They could have at least say hi or gave a hint to you that they saw you. That's appropriate to greet someone. That's true. It's psychologically appropriate to greet someone. So because that didn't happen, you think, okay, so this individual doesn't value me, this individual is disrespectful. That's the assigned meaning. Now, what has really happened? The individual rushed away when they saw you, but they were distressed before they saw you. So when you reflect back, you realize, okay, when I saw this individual, they were in distress. When they saw me, they moved on. What was really happening is that that individual got bad news. Maybe some relative just passed away, or maybe they're about to lose a job, or something that caused distress onto them. And when they saw you, they were thinking, no, 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 no. I'm not going to share this distress with anyone. It's bad enough I have it. I don't want to ruin someone else's day. So when they saw you, they didn't even really have time to think, just rushed away. So your interpretation was not correct. Your perception, let me say, what you saw was correct. They rushed by when they saw you, but your interpretation was not correct. And too often, people get into arguments and fights based on their interpretation that's not right. And too often, we interpret things in a bad way based on our own inner poverty. We have been conditioned by society to perceive things a certain way, and we invest in those expectations. So we want to perceive things a certain way, and when someone does not match our perception, we discard them. Or when we can't discard them, we become annoyed, we become upset. That's the common and default way human beings operate, which comes, though, to the fallen state of mankind. God does not want us to operate that way. Unfortunately, most of us do. That's why believers ought to be renewed in their minds so that we will operate the right way. Now, so you know now that observing is not comparing. Even though a comparison can be part of an observation. To observe means that you reflect on what you saw and what was going on, and then you put it in context. So let's say you're on your way to the supermarket and you see a colleague and they rush by when they see you. Okay? How late was it? Oh, it was 10 a.m., so 10 in the morning. It was on a Saturday. But then you remember, hold on a minute. Isn't he working on Saturday? So why is he out of work on Saturday while he's normally at work? So then you think, oh, hold on a minute. So he rushed by when he saw me? He should be at work. It clicks onto you. He should have been at work, but he's not at work. And I'm a colleague. So I saw him out of work while he should have been at work. So it can be that he called himself sick because he didn't want to go to work. And when he saw me, he just rushed away in hope I didn't see him because I will be able to report him to the boss. He may lose his job. That may be the case. Or it can be that he was just fired and he didn't want to tell anyone because he's still processing it. Or sometimes there is a malignant motive on their part. Maybe they are narcissistic and they look down on you. Maybe that's the case, but it doesn't have to be the case. Too often we imagine the worst case scenarios when we assign meaning to stuff. We should stop doing that. We shouldn't even assign meaning to things. We should see things for what they are. Now, when do we assign meanings? When we have influence. When we have influence and we want to exercise influence for the better, we assign good meaning to stuff. That is what we should do. We should assign meaning in the positive when we have influence. That's how we have a good influence on others. By projecting our imaginations in the external world so that we have influence over others for the better. Then we assign meaning. A meaning to what we are doing. But even if what we're doing is right and the meaning assigned to it is good, if someone has a dark mindset, they can still assign a bad meaning to the good you're doing. So some people will become angry at you. Some people will even want to fight you and attack you based on their own inner poverty. And that's absolutely nothing to do with you. Okay? So learn that. Don't assign bad meanings too quickly to what happens. That's something we need to unlearn. About observing. You need to be aware of the following. Every time we don't observe, we get along in a cycle. And that's what most people do. They get along in a cycle. They don't actually observe what's going on around them. Most people operate on an unconscious status quo. That's their default state, to be unconscious. Not literally unconscious, because then they would either be asleep or dead, but they're unconscious of what's going around them. They're just relaxed and relieved in a pattern. That's what most people are. So because they don't observe, they can only see and hear. And when they see and hear, they interpret the things based on their own expectations. And now they think that when they take actions based on their own expectations, that they're acting out of their free volition. What's going on is that they are programmed and they're acting out the program. So there is no real free choice involved anyway. They perceive it as free choice, but it's not free choice because they're just acting out the program. So as believers, we ought to learn to observe, not to just see and hear and then assign a meaning. We need to observe. Now, sometimes it's not really you assign a meaning. Sometimes you're just right. Sometimes, for example, let's say someone is ignoring you for a long time, but they don't ignore other people, then you know for sure that they have something against you. That's not you assigning a bad meaning to it. That's just you seeing it for what it is. So there are times you see things as they are and your intuition reveals onto you what's going on. That's correct. But also a lot of times something happens, and because we're shocked by it, because it doesn't match our expectations, we assign a bad meaning to it. We often assign a bad meaning when things don't match our expectations. That's why we ought to reflect on ourselves to see whether our expectations are correct or not. So, about observing things. What you need to understand is that anytime a cycle comes near an end, there's going to be some falling apart or some escalation. But a lot of people don't realize that this world is all about patterns and cycles. They think time is just a linear thing. Now, history is a linear thing from the past towards the future, and we are in the present. For example, your grandparents existed in their bodies. Your grandparents still exist, they're shown now, but their life in their bodies has happened already. That was in the past. Your great-grandchildren will exist somewhere in the future. We're not there yet. That will unfold. So that is linear. But just because the time periods are linear doesn't mean that time itself is linear. Time, or you can call it human history in general, is a loop. Human history itself is a cycle that repeats itself with new generations. For example, you can have, let's say, the Babylonian Empire that began with a conflict. There was conflict in the world, there was chaos, and the Neo-Babylonians came under Emperor Nebuchadnezzar. They established tranquility in international relations at the time, and Babylon became dominant throughout the earth. And after like 70 years, when there was a decay in the system because the the social cohesion fell apart, now you had the Medes and the Persians taking over the Babylonian Empire, and they extended, called it the Medo-Persian Empire. So now it was a different empire with two other nations in charge, but it is the same cycle that has continued. And the people that are alive now under the Medo-Persian Empire are new people. They were not alive at the beginning of the Babylonian Empire, so it's a new generation, but it's the same cycle. And the same conflict, honeymoon phase, building up attention, and decay will also happen to the Medo-Persian Empire. Then the Greek Empire came, and with the Greek Empire, it happened very quickly that it was reformed on time into the Roman Empire. And from the Roman Empire, you had a division between the East and the West. From the West, you had various kingdoms that became dominant over the world. And that's how human history goes. So human history, time itself, is a loop that happens in a cycle. That's what it is. But because we put focus on the linear events, we perceive time and human history itself as a linear thing. That's why I tend to think that it's a linear process, that things are becoming better. It's a loop. And once you're aware of this, you are able to observe better what's going on around you. That you can see in which time period you're in. Because one thing we need to understand, Christ taught these things to his disciples. That's why Christ said you have to pay attention to the signs of the times. Because if you, let's say that someone, I'm going to use a parable now. Let's say someone grew up in, let me take a good time period. They grew up in Pyongyang in the 1940s. They were born in the 1930s and they grew up in the 1940s. They had the teenage years in the 1940s. Suddenly, in the mid of that decennia, Japanese rule ended in Korea. And instantly, they were divided between North and South, with the North being governed by Russia and the South being governed by the United States. So now, that cycle of the Japanese Empire ended. So the Japanese Empire, with their dominance, that was gone. So now, the country was divided in two. So let's say this young man, Jung, thinks, it's just temporarily, soon it will all be over, we'll be one unified country again. Now, if he would have paid attention to the cycle, he would realize, okay, the Japanese Empire collapsed, so this is a time period of escalation. First is an escalation, and then it'll be a honeymoon phase when a new order has been established. So if he sees that his country is divided in two, and worldwide there is this conflict between Russia and the United States, and he knows, okay, so this division of us in North and South is going to last for a while. And if he would realize that, he could think, you know what, let me get out of this northern part very quickly before we're locked over here. But let's say he doesn't pay attention to the signs of the times. He doesn't realize that history is a loop, a cycle that repeats itself. So the 1950s will come, and suddenly he hears that Kim Il-sung has invaded the capital in the south, and now there's this big war. Within a few years, millions die, and now he's locked up in the north. He can't go to the south, not from the south to the north. But yes, relatives in the south, and he also had a partner in the south. What has happened? This June did not pay attention to the signs of the times. If he would have paid attention to the signs of the times, he could have foreseen that bad stuff was going to happen, things going to escalate worse, let me get out of here, or let me take action. He did not do it. Because we know. Because for us it's history, for us it's already happened. That after the Korean War, this country's been divided ever since. With border restrictions between the North and the South. But those that grew up in the 1940s may have thought, okay, this is just a temporal thing between America and Russia, it's going to be over. They did not see the Korean Civil War coming. But they could have realized, okay, something bad is going to happen very soon with how things are going on. If they would have paid attention to the context, they would have observed the context, they would have observed the events. By observing the events, they've realized, okay, we need to pay attention, we need to be aware here. Or let's say that someone was 30 years old and you had this Russian Revolution going on in 1917. He would likely think, you know what, okay, maybe this thing is not so bad after all. But we know, because for us it's history, for about 70 years, there was this reign of terror under quote-unquote communist leaders with a lot of forced starvation and all of that. So that guy was in his 30s. Even if he would have outlived that quote-unquote communist regime of the Soviet Union, he would be around 100 years old, to be 105 years old when it's all over, and he has spent most of his life under oppression. But if it was 1912, for example, and he would have observed what's going on, he could realize, okay, the cycle is coming to an end, the cycle of the Russian Empire is coming to an end. Okay, so somewhere things are going to escalate, things are going to get worse. When we observe the times, when we observe the cycles, we are ahead. And pagans do that. That's why pagans, no matter what political regime comes into place, most of the time, most pagans are well off because they pay attention to the cycles. Commoners don't. Commoners just get along with what's going on. That's why they end up in very bad circumstances. As believers, we should be smarter than pagans. We should pay attention to the cycles. And right now, there are many believers who are deceived. They're investing in the Trump administration, which is the first Trump administration coming to an end. I'm not sure whether Trump will have a second term or not. Time will tell. But this Trump administration is a sign that the cycle of the political bubble of the United States has come to an end. So that's a time of escalation. And in times of escalation, this will get worse. And then a shift occurs when some other power takes over. So if those believers will pay attention to history and realize the period of the cycle that they're in now, they would not endorse nor invest in Trump. Because they would look at the bigger picture. Too often believers end up trapped in bad situations, or we end up supporting the wrong side because we don't observe. So I'm telling you, believers, observe. Don't just see. Don't just see and hear and react emotionally or respond based on your interpretation. Observe. Be at peace.